Okay, just to
Just
recap, guys. So we did a part one and a part two. In the part one, we spoke a bit about Abram. We didn't give everything about Abram. We'll do it now as we carry on. But this is the summary of the history of Israel, where they traveled to, where they were situated, what happened in the past, the wars that were fought, why they were fought. We see that the Pharaoh who knew Joseph, who gave Joseph the ring and the kingdom to rule over the 7 good and the 7 bad years, that Pharaoh knew Joseph, and the people around that time adored Joseph and his family. They were seen as royalty. And then eventually another Pharaoh makes his appearance, the son of that Pharaoh. And he doesn't like Joseph, but because of well, let me recap. So the Pharaoh who knew Joseph brought Joseph's family up from the land of Canaan. And he said, listen, guys, the land Goshen is here before you. Choose where you want to live. And they start living all over. And then the Pharaoh who knew Joseph not, he despised Joseph. And they eventually went into a war, and they saw the power of Israel that were called the 150 men that was called out of Goshen to kill the 400 kings and opposers with Esau. And then they eventually say, listen, but these Israelites is a very strong nation. Only 150 killed 4,000, and we couldn't even win them. So what eventually then happens is a report goes to the Pharaoh who knew Joseph not, and says, these people are powerful. We need to put them into slavery. Otherwise, they'll become numerous and they will conquer us. And then eventually they do it, and we read how they did it. It's not like Israel of old were dumb and stupid and just went to slavery. When you read your 66 canon Bible, you think, well, why would they put them in slavery so easily? These people are powerful. They use the method of the boiling frog, right? When you put a frog in a pot on a stove and you start heating the water slowly, they get used to the heat and they adapt to that heat until eventually the frog boils to death. But if you take a frog and then take it and you throw it directly into that pot that is warm, it will just jump out. So they brought them into slavery by saying, okay, all of us, not only you that are from Israel, all of us around in this kingdom will come and build the cities and the strongholds. And every month a few of them went away, until only Israel was there, the boiling frog. But we did see that some in Israel weren't there. For example, the Levites weren't there. There were other people and nations that also weren't there. And on another story, just on the other side, we haven't touched on this yet. Japheth, his people weren't there, but Japheth is also scattered all over in that region, which we'll get to. Japheth will still cover. And then just to recap, remember, I'm starting at Abram and moving forward, and from Abram moving backwards, because it's just easier that way. So we gave a little background on Abram and how we taught the people the law, and we're going to now go in and see what promises he made with his son, because we saw that God made promises to Abraham saying, in your seed will inherit this country that I promised to you. And then we'll see his seed come up. But when his seed come up, some things are said to them which are very important, which we should not miss, because we did see for a fact that the law was there way before. It was only locked in a covenant on Mount Sinai, but the law was always there. Hence, the people in Israel being called, people of Israel being called out of Egypt, so that they can go worship God in His way and in His manner. They knew how to do that prior. The Levites knew, they lived in Goshen, how to worship God, but they couldn't worship that way anymore because they were in slavery. Hence, God brings the majority of Israel who were in bondage and slave out. So in Scripture, there's a concept you must understand. And this concept is, let's say this circle represents Israel, right? This whole circle represents Israel. For argument's sake, just to make it easy, I'm just going to divide it in half and say this is Egypt and this is the land of Goshen. Okay? Goshen is the land that lay out before them and say, go take for yourselves land. The land is good. You can plant. There's enough grazing for your cattle and sheep. and they start expanding outside of this. But for now, I'm just using this. So Israel is always seen, I want you to understand this concept, where the majority are gathered at the moment. Israel is always where the majority is. So when God, for example, takes Israel into exile, he sometimes leaves people behind. They are seen as Israel, but not the majority. They are seen as those preparing the land. Israel is always seen to where the majority is moving. So in this time frame of slavery, the most of Israel is here in Egypt, doing bondage work as slaves. But we do see the Levites are here, but they are not seen as Israel because the majority is here. Even though all of this encompasses Israel, and Israel is the majority here, these people are focused on because that's where the majority is. There's a remnant down here happening, and there's some scattered all over where the Levites are, but the majority of Israel is here. Yahweh didn't come and save them for those who were here and not in slavery. The majority is seen as where they are all gathered. So, in prophetic speech in Scripture, the same thing applies. Israel is always where the majority of Israel is situated at that time. That's why it's called, for example, the cities of Judah or islands of Israel, the pockets where Israel are most present. Hope you can follow and remember that concept because we're going to need it as we carry on. So then we started reading, we ended up with Jasher chapter 9. We'll recap on that. We'll go to Jasher chapter 10, and then we'll just go back again to Abram before we carry on. Because this is, remember part 1, this is actually everything has to do with the Egyptian and the Edomite who cannot enter the congregation. Right? So far we've seen, we went to Abram and we said, okay, well, Abram is not a Hivite or a Hittite. He's out of the Chaldeans, called out of the land of Ur, but his lineage doesn't say he's there. So we realized then, okay, he's called that because that's the origin of where he's from, right? The country where he's situated at the time, the people named them after that. In the same way that Moses was called the Egyptian, even though he was Hebrew, we knew he was not an Egyptian, but he's called an Egyptian. We know he's not this Egyptian man, and we know his bloodline is not Egyptian because you have Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And we know that the Egyptians, or Mitzrayim, is out of Ham. And we know that Moses' line is from Eber way back then, out of Shem. Right? So we then went into the genealogy and we showed you, okay? See, Abraham is called this not because he's of that bloodline. He's only called that because that is his country of origin. And we gave you some examples. We're going to give a bit more. And then, just to also recap, remember how Joseph grew up in Egypt. Not grew up, but grew the kingdom in Egypt when his brothers sold him. And he was crowned as a king. And only in the throne alone was Pharaoh greater than he was. And then Joseph's whole seed line, Ephraim and Manasseh, all of them, and the youngest, Benjamin and them, they're all seen as royalty in Egypt. They never go into that bondage or slavery. Because of Joseph's bloodline and what he has done, they don't touch him. Because he saved the whole of Egypt and Canaan and all the countries around through gathering, preparing the wheat and everything for the 7 bad years that was to come. So he was at the time that his brothers and stuff was in subject. His descendants were seen as a sort of royalty. Don't touch. Crown game, don't touch. But go touch those, if you understand what I'm saying. So just keep that in mind as we carry on. So did we read the whole of Jasher chapter 9?
No, we just read the first 4 verses.
Okay, so let's start off and start reading Jasher chapter 9.
Okay, it says, And Haran, the son of Terah, Abram's oldest brother, took a wife in those days. Haran was 39 years old when he took her. And the wife of Haran conceived and bare a son and called his name Lot. And she conceived again and bare a daughter, and she called her name Milcah. And she conceived and bare a daughter and called her name Sarai. Haran was 42 years old when he begat Sarai, which was in the 10th year of the life of Abram. And in those days, Abram and his mother and nurse went out from the cave, and the king and his subjects had forgotten the affair of Abram. And Abram came out of the cave, and he went to Noah and to his son Shem, and he remained with them to learn the instruction of Yahweh and his ways. And no man knew where Abram was, and Abram served Noah and Shem, his son, for a long time. And Abram was in Noah's house 39 years, and Abram knew Yahweh from 3 years old, and he went in the ways of Yahweh until the days of his death. And Noah and his son Shem had taught him. And all the sons of the earth in those days greatly transgressed against Yahweh, and they rebelled against him, and they served other gods, and they forgot Yahweh who had created them in the earth. And the inhabitants of the earth made unto themselves at that time every man his gods, gods of wood and of stone, which could neither speak, hear, nor deliver. And the sons of men served them, and they became their gods. And the king and all of his servants, and Terah with all of his household, were then the first of those that served those gods of wood and stone. And Terah had 12 gods of large size that he made of wood and stone, after the 12 months of the year, and he served each one monthly. And every month Terah would bring his meat offering and his drink offering unto his gods. Thus Terah did all the days. And that generation were wicked in the sight of Yahweh. And they thus made every man his god, but they forsook Yahweh who had created them. And there was not a man found in those days in the whole earth who knew Yahweh, for they served each man his own god, except Noah and his household, and all those that were under his counsel knew Yahweh in those days. And Abram, the son of Terah, was waxing great in those days in the house of Noah, and no man knew it, and Yahweh was with him. And Yahweh gave Abram an understanding heart, and he knew all the works of that generation were vain, and that all of their gods were vain, and that they were all vain. And Abram saw the sun shining upon the earth, and Abram said unto himself, Surely now this sun that shines upon the earth is Yahweh, and I will serve. And Abraham served the sun in that day, and he prayed to him. And when evening came, the sun set as usual, and Abram said within himself, Surely this cannot be Yahweh. And Abram still continued to speak within himself, Who is he who made the heavens and the earth, and who created the earth? Where is he? And night darkened over him, and he lifted up his eyes towards the west, towards the north, the south, and the east, and he saw the sun had vanished from the earth, and the day became dark. And Abram saw the stars and the moon before him, and he said, Surely this is Yahweh who created the whole earth, as well as man. And behold, these are his servants, the gods around him. And Abram served the moon and prayed to it all night. And in the morning, when it was light and the sun shone upon the earth as usual, Abraham saw all things that Yahweh his Elohim had made upon the earth. And Abram said unto himself, Surely these are not gods that made the earth and all of mankind, but these are the servants of Yahweh. And Abram remained in the house of Noah, and there knew Yahweh and his ways, and he served Yahweh all the days of his life. And all the generation forgot Yahweh and served other gods of wood and stone, and rebelled in all of their days. And King Nimrod reigned securely, and all the earth was under his control, and all of the earth was of one tongue and of words of union. And all the princes of Nimrod and his great men took counsel together, Put, Mizraim, Cush, Canaan, with their families. And they said one to each other, Come and let us build ourselves a city, and a strong tower, and its top reaching the heaven, and we will make ourselves famed, so that we may reign upon the whole earth, in order that the evil of our enemies may cease from us, that we might reign mightily over them, and they might not become scattered over the whole earth on the account of their wars. And they went up before the king, and they told the king these words. And the king agreed with them in this affair, and he did so. And all the families assembled, consisting of about 600,000 men. And when they went And then they went to seek extensive pieces of the ground to build a city and the tower. And they sought the whole earth, and they found none like unto the valley of the east of the land of Shinar. About 2 days' walk, and they journeyed there and dwelt there. And they began to make bricks and burn fires to build the city and the tower that they had imagined to complete. And the building of the tower was unto them a transgression and a sin, and they began to build it. And whilst they were building against Yahweh, our Elohim of heaven, they imagined in their hearts to war against him and to ascend into the heaven. And all these people and all the families divided themselves into 3 parts. The first said, we will ascend into heaven and fight against him. The second said, we will ascend into the heaven in the place and place our own gods there to serve them. And the third part said, we will ascend into heaven and smite him with bows and spears. And Yahweh knew all of their works and all of their evil thoughts. And he saw the city and the tower which they were building. And when they were building, they built themselves a great city, a very high, strong tower. And on the account of its height, the mortar and bricks did not reach the builders in their ascent into it until those who went up had completed a full year. And after that, they reached the builders and gave them the mortar and the bricks. Thus it was done daily. And behold, these ascended and others descended the whole day. And if a brick should fall from their hands and get broken, they would weep over it. But if a man fell and died, none of them would even look at him. And Yahweh knew their thoughts. And it came to pass when they were building that they cast arrows towards the heaven, and all the arrows fell upon them, filled with blood. And they said, and they saw, they themselves each other, surely we have slain all of those who are in heaven. For this was from Yahweh in order to cause them to err, and in order to destroy them from the face of the ground. And they built a tower and a city, and they did this thing daily until many years were elapsed. And Yahweh said to the 70 angels which stood foremost before him, to those who were near him, saying, come and let us descend and confuse their tongues, that no man shall understand the language of his neighbor. And they did so unto them. And from that day following, they forgot each man his neighbor's tongue, and they could not understand to speak in one tongue. And when the builder took from his hands of his neighbor lime or stone, which he did not order, the builder would cast it down and throw it upon his neighbor that he would die. And they did this so many days, and they unalived many of them in this manner. And Yahweh smote them into 3 divisions that were there, and he punished them according to their works and their designs. Those who said, we will ascend into the heaven to serve our gods, became like apes and elephants. And those who said, we will smite the heaven with arrows, Yahweh unalived them. 1 man through the hand of his neighbor, and a 3rd division of those who said, we will ascend into heaven and fight against him, Yahweh scattered them throughout the earth. And those who were left amongst them, when they knew they understood the evil which was coming upon them, they forsook the building, and they also became scattered upon the face of the whole earth. And they ceased building the city of the tower. Therefore he called the name Babel, for Yahweh confounded the language of the whole earth. Behold, it was at the east of the land of Shinar. And as the tower which the sons of men built, the earth opened its mouth and swallowed up a 3rd part thereof. And a fire descended from heaven and burned another 3rd. And the other 3rd is left to this day. And it is the part which is aloft, and its circumference is a 3 days' walk. And many of the sons of men died in that tower, a people without number.
Okay, so a couple of things we see confirmed here. And I want you to take note to Abram, because we're going to start focusing on him a bit more so we can see something happening. But a couple of things happened. This is the Tower of Babel, that event in the land Shire, which Nimrod was called after. But Nimrod himself took on the name Shir because of an ancestor. And the ancestor goes all the way back to Roni. We'll go check that in the genealogy later. So This is an evil land. Abram flees, right? And he goes and he lives with Noah and Shem. Remember in the previous teaching how the land was divided by lot to the three sons of Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Now Shem and Noah live together, and Abram goes to them, and here we see them showing Abram and teaching Abram in Yahweh's ways, keeping the Torah, being obedient. All of these things are happening. So we do see that the law is in fact was there way before Mount Sinai. It was only locked in a covenant at Mount Sinai, right? And then just note, at the Tower of Babel, the languages are confused because of this idol worship that comes in. It's got a big backbone of history to it, right? They started worshipping idols because of the 200 fallen angels who taught them to do so. This is where the Greek mythology comes in with the god of thunder and all of these characters you see in movies today. They all resemble the 200 fallen angels. So there's a lot of truth in this mythology. And this is why these people start building the tower. And this is why they start worshipping idols. Is because of that teaching that some of the nations received from their fathers, the sons of Satan or the fallen angels. And then the people start mingling together and they adopt that teaching of idols and stuff. But to Abram, that's really weird. And then you see what Abram does. He starts asking. Very interesting, right? Sanctification. We all do that. Is this my God, the sun? The sun that comes up and shines every day? Surely that must be Yahweh. And he realized it's not, for those who still believe that the sun is the Messiah and Yahweh or whatever they believe. You have not gone through the sanctification that Abraham has gone through. But in any case, and then Noah and Shem start teaching him in Yahweh's ways, and he realizes what the truth is, and he starts worshiping God. Abraham kept the law. The law was only locked in a covenant. So then at this Tower of Babel, these people devised an evil. They were all of one language. They were all of one descendants at that time. Shem, Ham, Japheth. Something happens, but they are all of one language. That at that tower, that language gets destroyed, and those people who start worshipping, according to those idols and stuff, the fallen angels' covenants with them, they are seen, note, as animals, monkeys and baboons and elephants. And it's very important for the book of Enoch, where we're going to go to later on, chapter 89. Because they start not keeping God's law, not walking in God's ways, not doing what he says, they do exactly the opposite. And then we see another interesting thing happening. So I wrote it down. All of those angels that was present with Yahweh in the heavenly council, when the report came to Yahweh, look, these people are building a Tower of Babel. What happens? Something is said which is very interesting. Let us, Yahweh and the angels, let us go and confuse their language. Remember, let us make man in our image and in our likeness. It's got nothing to do with the Trinity. Otherwise, this has a problem. How many angels are in the heavenly council? 10,000 times 10,000 times 10,000 and another multitude. So now you're going to have about probably 1 billion gods. If you say, let us go make man in our image and in our likeness, that is the heavenly council, God speaking to his angels. Same thing happens at the Tower of Babel. The angels that was in his assembly, let us go down and confuse their languages. And the military ranks, they send their angels to go and do it, and they confuse the languages, just for interest's sake. The whole different topic. I don't want to even get into Trinity now. So here we see the backdrop of Abraham going and he's learning Yahweh's ways. And then we also read that Noah and Shem and the people living in the region where Noah is, only they are obedient to God's law. All the others stopped doing it. When Noah got off the boat and Yahweh gave the sons a lot according to the land. Remember in the other teaching what we read? Go and keep Yahweh's ways. Be obedient to Yahweh. And we see the sons don't do that. But only Noah and Shem and those people around do it. And now Abram comes there, and Abram learns for over 30 years. And then Abram realizes who his God is. And Abram keeps the law. So we must now go, before I even do that, let's quickly read a bit more about the Tower of Babel, because the tongue there was Hebrew. Okay? So Just to confirm, just go read it in our Bible first before we go to the. So just so people can connect the scriptures for themselves and see that the Apocrypha is scripture. Go to Genesis chapter 5, or Genesis chapter 11, read verse 5 through 9 quickly.
It says, And Yahweh came down to see the city and the tower which the children of men builded. And Yahweh said, Behold, the people is one, and they have all one language. And this they begin to do, and now nothing will be restrained from them, which they have imagined to do. Go to, let us go down, and therefore confound their language, that they may not understand one another's speech. So Yahweh scattered them abroad from thence upon the face of the whole earth, and they left off to build the city. Therefore this is the name and what it is called, Babel, because Yahweh did there confound their language of the whole earth, and from thence did Yahweh scatter them abroad upon the face of the whole earth.
So Yahweh says, and Yahweh went down to go and see, and we just read that he sent his angels. Why? It's agency. Yahweh's angels, they are the eyes of the seven rock that bring the report. Nevertheless, he then confuses the language. That's why it's called Babel, right? Babel, a clicking and a clacking of tongues, like the people trying to speak tongues today. Makes no sense, but Yahweh confuses that language, right? That language is then confused and lost. But remember from Noah and Shem, and now we're going to see something happening with Abraham. Because only Israel is locked in the covenant, but Israel is the descendants of Abraham, same language that goes throughout Scripture. So we must quickly go and confirm that. Quickly go to Jubilee, the book of Jubilee. We're going to read chapter 12, verse 22 to 27.
Okay. And it reads, And he made an end of speaking and praying, and behold, the word of Yahweh was sent to him through me, saying, Get thee up from thy country and from thy kindred, and from the house of thy father, unto a land which I will show thee, and I will make thee a great and numerous nation, and I will bless thee, and I will make thy name great, and thou shalt be blessed in the earth. And in thee all the families of the earth will be blessed. And I will bless them that bless thee, and curse them that curse thee. And I will be an Elohim to thee, and thy son, and thy son's son, and to all thy seed. Fear not from henceforth unto all generations of the earth, for I am Yahweh. And Yahweh said, Open his mouth and his ears, that he might speak with his mouth, with the language which has been revealed. For it has ceased from the mouths of all the children of men, from the day of the overthrow of Babel. And I opened his mouth and his ears and his lips, and I began to speak with him in Hebrew, in the tongue of creation. And he took the books of his fathers, and these were written in Hebrew, and he transcribed them, and he began from henceforth to study them. And I made known to him which he could not understand, and he studied them during the 6 rainy months.
Okay, so here we see at the Tower of Babel, the nations present at the time all had one language. That language was now confused, and everyone spoke their language. If the monkey spoke his language and the elephant spoke his language, meaning people, they were now seen as beasts and brute beasts of the field. So now they all have their language, and here along comes Abram. Abram goes to Noah and Shem, and he learns in Yahweh's ways. And then the language of the Hebrew, his tongue and eyes are open, and he can now see and translate the books. And it says, and the books were given unto him, and he could read. What books existed? This is a question that needs to be answered, because what books existed that was given to him? Because there's many books, right? But one of them you will see was passed down as the book of Enoch. Abraham learned directly out of that book. I'm going to prove it later on in the teaching. The scripture says it verbatim. It's simple. So he gets these scriptures and he starts teaching in these, learning in this language, the language of God's creation, the Hebrew language. That was the language that Shem, Ham, and Japheth had. The problem is Shem was obedient. He lived with Noah. Abram is out of Shem. Abram comes back so he can now have a promise of a covenant. But Ham and Japheth, something happens there. Japheth for a long time becomes obedient. He is sometimes also a sojourner or a Gentile who joins them to Israel. But Ham totally corrupts it, everything. Ham's line is totally corrupt because of something that happened. So when we start mapping out some of these genealogies, especially when it gets to Esau, we'll start seeing why it's so corrupt and what happened. Okay? So that being said, I want you to lay focus on Abraham receiving the lively oracles, his books, learning out of it and learning in that tongue. And when he does, it says his eyes are open and his mouth is open. He can now speak and understand this. Full repentance. Remember previously Abraham said, surely the sun that rises every morning, that must be Yahweh. He was seeking. Who is my God? Where is my creator? Where does he go to? To those who know. He goes to Noah and he goes to Shem. A priesthood that was saved from the flood. Okay? So, that being said, let's just quickly confirm this Abraham and his obedience to Yahweh, that he kept the law way before Mount Sinai, right? So quickly read it for us in Genesis chapter 26, verse 5.
Genesis 26, 5. It says, because that Abraham obeyed my voice and kept my charge, my commandments, my statutes, and my laws.
Okay, so here we see Abraham kept the commandments, the statutes, and the laws, correct? Quickly confirm it again in the book of Jubilee, 24:11.
It states, and in thy seed shall all the nations of the earth be blessed, because thy father obeyed my voice, kept my charge, my commandments, my laws, my ordinances, my covenant, and now obey my voice and dwell in this land.
Okay, Abraham, again in Jubilee, tells you just what Genesis told you. He kept the laws of Yahweh. So the law definitely existed. Quickly go read about it in Jasher, while you're in Jubilees, quickly read it again in Jubilees, chapter 20, verse 1 through 8. It
says, and in the 42nd Jubilee in the first year and the 7th week, Abraham called Ishmael and his 12 sons and Isaac his 2 sons and the 6 sons of Keturah and their sons. And he commanded them that they should observe all the way of Yahweh, and that they should work righteousness and love each other's neighbor, and act on this manner amongst all men, that that they should each also walk with regard to them and do judgment and righteousness on the earth, that they should circumcise their sons according to the covenant which he had made with them, and not deviate to the right hand or to the left hand of all the paths which Yahweh had commanded us, and that we should keep ourselves from all fornication, uncleanness. And if any woman or maid commit fornication amongst you, burn her with fire, and let them not commit fornication with her after their eyes and their heart, and let them not take to themselves wives from the daughters of Canaan, for the seed of Canaan will be rooted out of the land.
Okay, here we see again Abraham keeping the law, and because he keeps the law, that's why he's locked in a covenant of the circumcision. That is now locked with him in a covenant because of the land. And then note what he does. He calls all his sons, Ishmael, the other sons, all of them. And he says, be careful, my sons, not to do these things that Yahweh hates so much. Walk in his ways. Keep Yahweh's laws. This is a command to all his sons in all their generations. But only one line does it. But when he does this, another command is given, because Abraham has the law. Do not, my sons, the command is to everyone in Abraham, Isaac, Ishmael, and the other sons, all of them, they are told, do not, my sons, take off the children of Canaan. Don't do that. Remember this covenant I'm locking with you, my sons. Do not, by any means, my sons, take of the children of Canaan. Let it sink in. That law was there from the beginning. Ishmael is not allowed to take Canaan. The other sons are not allowed to take Canaan. And Isaac and Jacob are not allowed to take Canaan. What do the sons do after the commandment? Everyone goes and marries into Canaan, excepting Isaac, Jacob. Even Esau does it, doesn't keep the covenant. Hence, it's taken away from him. Just read that last part again. Let's listen carefully, because this now becomes very important. Mixing of
It
seeds.
says, "And if any woman or maid commit fornication among you, burn her with fire, and let her not commit fornication with her after the eyes of her heart. And let them not take themselves wives from the daughters of Canaan, for the seed of Canaan will be rooted out of the land."
Okay. Just save that verse and chapter, because I need to come back to it now. I just want to finish that Abram kept the law. And then I want to go show you what he promises his sons in our scripture and in the Apocrypha. And then we can see, because now we have to stop and say, okay, wait, hang on a second. Do you want to tell me that Abram was racist? Think about what I'm asking. This is what the people call me and my brothers. You are racist. So was Abram racist? And where did Abram get that command from? We're going to have to answer this. I'll still show you that he had the book of Enoch, and that's where he learned it from. Okay? We'll get to that. So just to save that chapter and verse, when I ask you, go back to that. Just read that for us, Adrian. Okay. So let's quickly carry on now. Quickly go to, because I'm just trying to prove that Abram was obedient to God. Okay? Just go to the book of Jasher.
Okay.
Read chapter 9, verse 5 through 7.
7. Okay, it says, "And Abram came out of the cave, and he went to Noah and to his son Shem, and he remained with them to learn the instruction of Yahweh and his ways. And no man knew where Abram was. And Abram served Noah and Shem his son for a long time. And Abram was in Noah's house 39 years. And Abram knew the way of Yahweh from 3 years old, and he went in the ways of Yahweh until the days of his death, as Noah and his son Shem had taught him. And all the sons of the earth in those days greatly transgressed against Yahweh, and they rebelled against him, and they served other gods, and they forgot Yahweh who had created them in the earth. And all the inhabitants of the earth made unto themselves at that time every man his gods, gods of wood and stone, which neither could speak, nor hear, nor deliver, and the sons of men served them, and they became their gods. And the king and all of his servants, and Terah with all of his household, with the first of those that served those gods of wood and stone."
Okay. Question: was Abraham obedient to God and his law?
Yes.
First witness. We read it in Genesis 26:5, right?
Yep.
Second witness. Okay. Now go to Jasher chapter 12. Read verse 38.
Says, "And Abram said to them, Do not bow down to me, but bow down to the Elohim of the world who made you, and serve him, and go his way. For he is he who delivered me from out of the fire. And it is he who created the souls and spirits of all men, and formed man in his mother's womb, and brought him forth into the world. And it is he who will deliver those who trust in him from all pain."
Does Abram tell them to go serve God?
Yep.
So does he keep the law?
Yep.
Fourth witness. Okay, just read the same chapter. Just read verse 42.
"And Abram returned on that day and went to his father's house, he and all the men that followed him. And Abram served Yahweh and his Elohim all the days of his life, and he walked in his ways and followed his law."
Did Abram keep the law of Yahweh? Fourth witness. How many witnesses establishes the truth?
2 or more.
Okay, let's quickly go to Jasher chapter 13. Just read verse 4.
And now therefore, if thou wilt hearken to my voice, and keep my commandments, my statutes, my laws, then I will cause thy enemies to fall before thee, and I will multiply thy seed like the stars of heaven. And I will send my blessing upon all the works of thy hands, and thou shalt lack nothing.
Note what happens here. Remember how we went to Hebrews and we said we must have faith like Abraham? What does Yahweh tell him? Now, Abraham, if you walk in my judgments, my statutes, my laws, then I'll multiply your seed and I'll give you the land to inheritance. Did Abraham have faith and did Abraham keep the law? Yes. So if you claim to have the faith of Abraham, why are you not keeping the law? Or is that a contradiction in the book of Hebrews? Because they all say, by faith Abraham was saved. Yes, what faith? He kept the commandments and the law, because you need to have faith to be obedient to God. Hence the Messiah. If he comes, you need to have faith and believe him, even though you didn't see it, that he said, do not think that I've come to abolish the law. You're saying now, you must think that he's come to abolish the law. Where's your faith? Okay, so here we see by faith. And this faith and obedience of Abraham sets a precedent that goes throughout all of Scripture, which gets to the mixing of seed. We read earlier how he told all his sons, and I'll ask you to reference that Scripture just now, Adrian. All his sons, do not take the daughters of Canaan. Now, it's not just said because he's racist or trying to be funny, because he tells his sons to live peacefully amongst all the nations of the world, just like Noah did. Right? Just like Moses did. It doesn't mean if you're not allowed to go and marry other nations, now all of a sudden you hate them. That is your Western today's mindset of thinking. Because if that is your logic, then you must explain to me why all the animals that Yahweh created are racist. The pigeon doesn't sleep with a horse, neither does the horse mix with a cat. Are they also racist? Or are they just obedient to their creator? Okay, so let's carry on. Just read verse, same chapter, 13. Read from verse 17 to 18. Or read to 21.
Oh, wait. Are we chapter 13 of Jasher?
Yes.
Okay. And you said 18 to 21?
Yeah. 17
okay.
to 21. 17 to
All right.
21.
17 to 21. Okay. All right. It says, and it was in the 15th year of Abram's dwelling in the land of Canaan, which is the 17th year of his life of Abram, Yahweh appeared to Abram in the year that he said unto him, I am Yahweh who brought thee out of Ur of Chaldee to bring thee this land for an inheritance. Now therefore walk before me and be perfect, and keep my commandments. For to thee and thy seed I will give this land for an inheritance, from the river of Mitzrayim unto the great river Euphrates. And thou shalt come to thy fathers in peace and in a good old age. And in the 4th generation shall return here in this land and shall inherit it forever. And Abram built an altar, and he called upon the name of Yahweh, who appeared to him. And he brought up sacrifices upon the altar of Yahweh. And at that time Abram returned, and he went to Haran to see his father and his mother, and his father's household. And Abram and his wife, and all belonging to him, returned to Haran. And Abram dwelt in Haran for 5 years. And many of the people of Haran, about 72 men, followed Abram, and Abram taught them the instruction of Yahweh and his ways, and he taught them to know Yahweh.
Many people followed Abram, and he taught them the instruction. And he says, in your 4th generation, you'll inherit this land, right? Because the genealogy has to be reckoned up to the 3rd generation. If the genealogy is given to the 3rd generation, that means you've proven something. You can now go into the 4th generation and keep covenant and enter the assembly of Yahweh. Remember this, because this is all about Deuteronomy, the Egyptian and them who cannot enter the congregation. Remember? So this is all the little hints we are now reading to understand what it means if the Egyptian and the Edomite cannot enter the congregation. Okay? So just by logic's terms, if Let's say Moses was an Egyptian, because they say the Egyptian man, we know he's not Egyptian. Could Moses enter the congregation? Oh, yes. Was he Egyptian? No. How would he prove it? 3 generations of genealogy. Then the 4th generation can enter. But if in the second, if you cannot give the 2nd generation of genealogy, what happens then? You can't enter the 3rd or the 4th. Following where we're going with this? But now we must note something. Just before we carry on, just go to same book, chapter 15, verse 17 quickly.
15, verse 17. And Sarai also prayed at that time and said, O Yahweh, the Elohim of heaven, thou didst tell my master Abraham to go from his land and from his father's house to the land of Canaan. And thou didst promise to dwell with him if he would perform thy commandments. Now behold, we have done that which thou didst command us, and we have left our land and our families, and we went to a strange land and to a people whom we have not known before.
So Sarah confirms, if Yahweh, you did command Abram to go to a strange land. You called him out of the land of earth from the Chaldeans. Called him to go to a strange land that you will give him, if he keeps your commandments. Faith of Abram? By faith, Abram. Hebrews. What does it mean? What faith did Abraham have? Well, we read he was obedient to God and he kept his law. That is what faith is. Not your modern day mindset of faith. It's believing the words that Yahweh has spoken. Obedience is always the key. Okay? So yeah, Sarah confirms that by faith he did that. He kept the law. And the promise was then given to him. Now, the other thing I want you to understand, now we're going to go into, Abraham was obedient. We've got the witnesses. There's many witnesses about it. Your 66 canon Bible tells you. The Apocrypha tells you. There's no contradiction in it. Just way more history than you thought. But here's a guy called Abram. He goes to Noah and he goes to Shem and he's taught the laws of Yahweh. But the question is, like we read, the books were handed over to Abram. How was he taught and what did they teach out of? This is the question. And this question is going to shock many people. Because the answer to it is so true. And when you realize how true that answer is, you start realizing how ignorant and how blind our people are. So, before I go and read it, is the book of Enoch valid? Think about my question. I'm going to prove it is. Remember how Adrian and I went through Enoch? We must still finish it. And we showed you in Enoch all the references in our Bible and even how the Messiah references the book of Enoch. Now I'm going to show you that the books that were handed to Abraham to keep Yahweh's law was given. And that they are books of Enoch. Others also, but the book of Enoch. Okay? So, listen carefully to what we're going to read now. Go to Jubilee.
Okay.
Chapter 21. Verse 10.
Okay, it says, and eat its meat on that day, and on the second day, and let not the sun on the second day go down upon it till it is eaten, and let nothing be left over for the third day. For it is not acceptable, for it is not approved, and let it no longer be eaten, and all who eats thereof will be bringing sin upon themselves. For thus I have found it written in the books of my forefathers, and in the words of Enoch, and in the words of Noah.
Hallelujah. Abraham, eat these meats on these feast days. Do these things. But do not eat it when the sun goes down. Abraham is commanding his sons now. Because so I, Abraham, found these things written in these books. As it's written in what book?
Enoch.
Let it sink in for a while. If you claim to have the faith of Abraham, Abraham believed the book of Enoch. Because that's where the command comes of not mixing of seeds. In your 66 canon Bible too, but it originates there. In Enoch. Remember how Abraham, read now, bring that verse up I told you to bring it about. He's telling his children, do not go to the daughters of Canaan. Go read it now.
Okay. I think it was, what chapter were we in? I exited out of it.
That's why I told you, remember the chapter and the verse.
Yeah, I had it pulled up, but then I clicked on Enoch. I know it was verse 4, but I can't remember what chapter it was in Jubilee. It was in Jubilees. I know that.
Never mind. Let me carry on, Adrian. I just want to open something here quickly. So
Yeah, was
we read
it
now
12?
that there were promises given to Abraham, right? On the condition that he's obedient to the law of Yahweh. And Abraham had faith, and he was perfect in all his generations, and he walked with God. And because he was obedient, the promise was now locked in a covenant with him, and the generations after him can inherit that land. Okay? But note how these books and manuscripts and how it's written in the book of Enoch was given to Abraham, and Abraham tells it to his sons, and he says, this is how I received it in the book of Enoch. What else did he tell his sons in that verse? Do not, by all means, my children, all of you, Ishmael, all of my descendants from my loins, do not go marry the daughters of Canaan. Please don't do that. There's a reason why Abraham says this, right? So I want you to see this, how this covenant is conditional with him. And then we're going to explain it a bit more. So I want to go read a bit in our scriptures about it, because I'm focusing more on Abraham now. I'm coming back to him. Just wanted to give you the history before Abraham, after Abraham a bit. Now we're getting back to Abraham and what's commanded of him.
While you do that, I'll read the chapter and verse out of Jubilees 20, verse 4 that you wanted me to. It says, and if any woman may commit fornication among you, burn her with fire. Let her not commit fornication with her eyes after her heart, and let them not take themselves wives from the daughters of Canaan, for the seed of Canaan will be rooted out of the land.
Okay. Now, let's quickly go there, okay? So the seed of Canaan will be rooted out of the land. And then you see he starts giving the commandments to his children. Where did he receive them from? He went to Noah and Shem, and the books were handed over to him, and he started speaking the Hebrew language and seeing. And now he starts commanding all his descendants to do that. But some do and some don't. Okay? So now let's quickly go to Genesis, right? Because on the basis of Abraham, if you are righteous and perfect and walk before me and keep my statutes and ordinances, look, see, I will give you this land. That's the kingdom, the promise of the kingdom. Be obedient, you can enter to this kingdom I promised you. But you must also remember prior. So I'm leaning that the people watching now have watched part 1 and 2. Prior in those parts, we saw how the land was divided by lot to Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And how Ham comes and he steals the portion of Shem and takes it for himself, thus forcing Abram and Terah and them to go live in the land of the Chaldeans, right? In Mizraim, in that area, which is not their land. They're living as strangers and sojourners in that land. Then Abram is eventually called out of the land of the Chaldeans to go down to the land of Canaan, because the Canaanites took it. That was Shem's portion. Canaan took it, and he says, come, this is your inheritance. If you are now obedient, I will establish this land. Why? Because it was locked in a lot throne for Shem, his descendants. But the Canaanites stole it. All along Scripture, every single time, with no fail, I'll show you in the genealogies. When it comes to Ham and his line, all evil happens. Every evil there is comes from Ham and his line. And if someone goes and joins them to Ham, it brings that curse into that family. It's an abominable thing that happens. Hence Abram telling his sons, listen guys, note, think about where we are. We're in Abram's days. Mount Sinai didn't happen. The children are still as slaves all over, living in Egypt, and they are scattered all over. And he tells his sons, listen my sons, do not take for yourselves of the daughters of Canaan. Why? There's a reason behind everything. Either your logic is flawed and you're thinking that he must be a racist, or you do not understand the scriptures. Because if you say that Abram is racist when he says this, you have a problem. The whole of creation is racist, meaning that the one that gave the commandment has to be racist too. Is your God a racist? Because I thought he shows no partiality, yet Esau he hates. Why? And I'm going to give you the verses of God showing no partiality and explain to you exactly what it means. Because he does show partiality. If he hates Esau and the Canaanites, what happens? Is he partial? He's very fair. People twist those words to tickle their own ears. Okay, so let's quickly read about this promise of Abraham in Genesis chapter 17, right? We're going to read 17 all the way through 11.
Okay, it says, And when Abram was 90 years old and 9, Yahweh appeared to Abram and said unto him, I am the Almighty Elohim, walk before me and be thou perfect. And I will make my covenant between me and thee, and I will multiply thee exceedingly. And Abram fell on his face, and Yahweh talked with him, saying, As for me, behold, my covenant is with thee, and thou shalt be a father of many nations. Neither shall thy name any more be called Abram, but thy name shall be called Abraham. For you are the father of many nations, and I have made thee. And I will make thee an exceedingly fruitful, and I will make nations of thee, and kings shall come out of thee. And I will establish my covenant between me and thee and thy seed after thee in their generations for an everlasting covenant, to be an Elohim unto thee and thy seed after thee. And I will give unto thee and unto thy seed after thee the land wherein thou art a stranger, all the land of Canaan, for an everlasting possession, and I will be their Elohim. And Yahweh said unto Abraham, Thou shalt keep my covenant, therefore thou and thy seed after thee in their generations. This is my covenant which you shall keep between me and you and thy seed after thee, and every man-child among you shall be circumcised. And you shall circumcise the flesh of your foreskin, and it shall be a token of the covenant betwixt me and you.
Okay, so the reason I'm reading it in Genesis, I'm just showing what we read earlier in Jubilee and Jasher. This is exactly the same as your 66 canon Bible. If you ever thought it wasn't, you are wrong. And consider what I'm showing you. I'm taking the Apocrypha and I'm lining it up with the 66 canon Bible. Because your Baal priest has taught you to be scared of those books. Because those books disprove the Trinity and disprove lawlessness. You have to keep the law. It's conditional. You must have a right to enter the garden and eat of the tree of life. It's earned. Okay, so, besides that, here we see the covenant locked to Abraham. And note what it says. In you. So remember how I said in the other teachings, we must always pause and consider where we are in the scriptures. We are now in the times of Abraham, way before Mount Sinai, right? And in this covenant, when Abraham is alive, is he the only man alive at the time?
No.
There are many other kingdoms and nations all around. We read about them in the wars, remember? Many kingdoms. I'm trying to show you that there are many people on the earth at that time. The Tower of Babel, all of this. There are many kingdoms around. And something is said to Abraham, which people tend to forget, because through him is the covenant of promise. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. And through their descendants, a covenant of promise. It says there, and in your seed, Abraham, you who are obedient to the Most High, in your seed I will make many nations, tongues, and seeds. In whose seed? Abraham's seed. What about all the others? See the picture. Number one, here's Abraham. Abraham is given a promise that there are many nations and kingdoms and kings will come from his loins. Sorry, there's a puzzle. Go away. Abraham, just putting here for Abraham. In Abraham, many nations, kingdoms, everything will come from his loins. What about all these kingdoms? Are they also part of the nations and the covenant and the promise? What about them? Where are they? It says, in you, Abram, I will create many nations. It doesn't mean that all the nations now stem from Abram. No, no. There are many nations around. Shem, Ham, Japheth. They start multiplying, especially Ham, very vigorously. But Japheth is there. He's got kingdoms and nations. And Japheth forms all the isles of the Gentiles, which we'll get into when we cover Japheth. But far along, when there are many millions of people on the earth, Abram is one who is called and says, in you, Abram, I will create many kingdoms and nations. Remember this, because out of Abram comes the 12 tribes. And out of the 12 tribes, remember, I'll cover this, tribes within tribes, kingdoms and nations. And when it says, I will gather all the nations and the tongues unto me, does it mean everyone who exists or everyone of the promise? What about all these others? They weren't locked in a covenant. Was God racist? Why did he tell that to Abraham? Because he says, from Abraham's loins come all these kingdoms, nations, and seeds. These are the same kingdoms, tongues, and nations that gather them to Yahweh in the end. That are gathered. All the nations and tongues will be saved. Which ones? Those outside of the covenant? Those outside of the seed of promise? Then what about all of these kingdoms and nations? Well, we do see something happen. We do see Shem, the kingdoms of Shem, expounding greatly. Not Shem, Japheth. Expounding greatly over the earth. Shem becomes obedient. Shem is given a prophecy. Shem, will dwell in the tents. You, Japheth, will dwell in the tents of Shem. But you, Ham, Canaan, you, Ham, will become a slave to them. That's interesting. And Abram just previously got the commandments, read the book of Enoch, and in Enoch it stated, do not mix the seeds, as Genesis, go after your own kinds. And then he commands his sons and says, do not take from the children of Ham. Don't go into the Canaanites. Please, my children, walk in obedience to God, to Yah. Does it mean if I now go and I go marry someone of Ham, a Cushite, Canaanite, whatever you want to call it, that I'm obedience to God? If you say yes, then you're contradicting Abraham. And you should have faith like Abraham and keep the laws, right? Because we know he kept the laws. I'm asking these questions because flags are going to pop up in your mind. And it's going to cause you to answer difficult questions. Very difficult, especially for your Western mindset over there. Very liberal. Very, very liberal. In the same way, note what I'm telling you. I'm giving you a history of a frog being thrown in a pot and the heat being turned up and slightly heated every time so that the frog doesn't notice. But when it gets to boiling point, it's too late for the frog. He'll boil to death. You Westerners there were told, listen guys, if you want to mix your seed, it's fine. But if you don't, you're a racist. Listen guys, everyone is accepted in the kingdom. You're allowed to be a gay and a lesbian. If you're not, you are homophobe. Listen, guys, we only wanted rights for our children. We want our children in the schools, and the gay and lesbian people say, listen, guys, we want access to your children. Why? If you say no, you're a homophobe. But they only wanted rights to be recognized to be married. You Westerners and the whole world says, mostly Westerners, liberal, they cause the foundation for every law that we have. But the Westerners says, fine, do what you want as long as you do it in your household. Go and get married, make it a law, that's fine. Does God's law state you can do that? No. You guys accept it. What happens? Now they can get married. Evil is never enough. Evil doesn't have an end. It just carries on. Now that's not enough. Now we can get married. Now we want pride parades. Okay, there's a pride day. Have one, a day for your gay and lesbian and minor attraction to children. Have that day for yourself once a year. It's called Pride Month. Thanks, guys. You guys sit aside. They're having their Pride Month, dancing and doing what Sodom and Gomorrah did. That's not enough. They want a Pride Week. Now, you give them a week. The frog is being boiled the whole week. Next year comes, there's a whole week. The week is no longer enough. Now they want a month. You say it's fine. Let's give this evil a month. A little leaven leavens the whole lump. Now they've got a whole Pride Month. That's not enough. What happens then? No. We can now get married. We wanted everything we want. We even got a Pride Month. We now want access to your children. What happens when you give them access? They become furries. They think they can sleep with dogs and cats. They think pedophilia is normal. That leaven has leavened the whole lump. The frog is being boiled in the pot. The same thing happened with mixed marriage. Even today, when I say it, they say you're racist. That's not what Scripture says. You're being boiled and you do not even know it. Wake up, people. Wake up. You do not know what is coming. These things that I'm saying now, think about it. It's not my opinion. If it was, you have to call Yahweh, the Creator, a racist. You have to call Abram racist. And the commandment he gave to his sons and their sons to their sons, also racist. You have to say that the Messiah, when he said, I have not come but for the lost sheep of the house of Israel, a racist. Because you know what he's saying? He's saying he's come for these kingdoms the promise was given to. But you are being boiled so much that it's relaxed your muscles in this warm water. Oh, it's so nice to be there. But where's the zeal for God? Where's that Caleb in you that's supposed to stand up, and Pinyas that says, no, enough is enough. If Yahweh said that these nations don't enter the kingdom, I will take it down, which we will cover. And Yahweh's anger is quenched. Was he a racist for that? Or is he just living according to the command? Does it mean that you hate everyone on this world? If that means that you hate everyone on the world, you must also hate animals. You must also hate the cat and the dog. The scripture says, know your beast, whether he's good or whether he's bad, and treat him accordingly. You guys should wake up. Now, sorry for that rant, but it just angers me sometimes. So here we see a covenant of promise given to Abraham. If he's obedient, Abraham, in you I will create many nations. All the nations and tongues will be gathered and saved. Ones of promise, never outside of context. Many nations, even though there were millions of nations around. But in Abraham, many nations will come. And we see it happen. Abraham, Isaac, not the others in there. They were given the command by Abraham, but not taking Canaan. But what do? What does Ishmael do? Goes to Canaan. And Jacob and Esau, what does Esau do? Goes to Canaan. The opposite of the commandment they received from their father. But Jacob does a blessing. Jacob, do not take off the daughters of Canaan, my son. Rather go to Padan Aram, your mother's father's daughters, and take your wife there. Was Isaac racist when he gave that command? Think about these things before you just give an answer. Reason it out for yourself. Because these things I'm telling you is not an opinion, people. This is the scriptures. Whether you like it or not. And when we get to Ezra and Nehemiah, you're going to see something happening. And those people have the faith of Abraham when that happens. Okay? So, now we see here in the book of Jubilee, in the book of Jasher, we've not touched Enoch yet. I wanted to lay the foundation for Enoch like we did now before we even go there. Abraham received these books, which included the book of Enoch, as it was written and commanded by Enoch. Abraham received. Remember, we read that. And those commandments are the commandments Abraham gives to his sons. And the reason he gives it to his son is because of covenant that was given to Abraham. Abraham, be you perfect. Walk before me, keep my statutes, my ordinances, and my laws. And to your seed I will give this land, the kingdom, as a promise. And out of you, if they are then obedient, I will create many kingdoms, nations, and tongues. Out of this line, Shem, kingdoms, nations, and tongues. Covenant of problem. It goes from Adam to Eve, all the way to Abram, all the way down to the Messiah, and even after. Okay? This is still the backdrop of before we even go and touch some of the genealogies. I know we went into genealogies earlier to prove that Abram was not a Hittite or anything of that. I think that was part 2, Adrian.
Yeah.
So now let's quickly go read. Because we read Genesis chapter 17, we just need to quickly go and confirm this again in the Apocrypha, what we've just read, this covenant of promise. So go to the book of Jasher. Quickly read chapter 13, verse 4 through 5 and 7 through 9. You can actually read all the way to 9. 4 through 9.
It says, And now therefore, if thou wilt hearken to my voice and keep my commandments, my statutes, and my laws, then I will cause thine enemies to fall before thee, and I will multiply thy seed like the stars of heaven. I will send my blessings upon all the works of thy hands, and thou shalt lack nothing. Arise now, take thy wife and all thy belonging to thee, and go to the land of Canaan and remain there. And I will be unto thee an Elohim, and I will bless thee. And Abraham rose and took his wife and all belonging to him, and he went to the land of Canaan as Yahweh had told him. And Abram was 50 years old when he went to Haran. And Abram came to the land of Canaan and dwelt in the midst of the city, and there he pitched his tents amongst the children of Canaan, the inhabitants of the land. And Yahweh appeared to Abram when he came from the land of Canaan, and he said, This is the land that I will give thee, and thy seed after thee forever. And I will take thy seed like the stars of heaven, and I will give unto thy seed as for an inheritance all the lands which thou seest. And Abram built an altar there, and Yahweh had spoken to him, and Abram there called upon the name of Yahweh. And at that time, at the end of 3 years, Abram's dwelling in the land of Canaan. And in the year Noah died, which is the 58th year of the life of Abram, and all the days that Noah lived were 950 years, and he died.
Okay? Make a knot in your ear, and remember the stars. I'll make your nations and kingdoms as many as the stars of heaven. It's crucial to understand the book of Hosea and the wedding covenant, right? So now, just go to same book, chapter 16, verse 21.
Okay, 16:21. And it reads, And I will give unto thee thy seed all these lands that thou seest with thine eyes. To them will I give them for an inheritance forever. Only be strong and do not fear, and walk before me, and be thou perfect.
Okay? I will give you this land. Only be strong, walk before me, and be perfect. The law is perfection, right? I'm just referencing what we read in Genesis, just so that people can see. Don't be scared of these books. Just go to Jubilee, book of Jubilee, chapter 13. Just read verse 1 all the way to 3.
And Abram journeyed from Haran, and took Sarai his wife, and Lot his brother, Haran's son, to the land of Canaan. And he came to a shore, and proceeded to Shechem, and dwelt near lofty oak. And he saw, and behold, the land was very pleasant, from the entering of Hamath to the lofty oak. And Yahweh said to him, To thee and thy seed I will give this land.
Okay, so this is the land promised on the basis of walk in my ways, Abraham, and I will give you this land. Hence, Abraham commands his sons to do so, so that they can inherit this land, right? Now go to chapter 14. Also, wait. First in chapter 13 where you are, just read verse 19 through 21.
Okay. It says, And in that year, when Lot was taken captive, Yahweh said unto Abram, after that Lot had parted from him in the 4th year of this week, lift up thine eyes from the place where thou art dwelling, northward and southward and westward and eastward. For all the land which thou seest I will give to thee and to thy seed forever. And I will make thy seed as the sand of the sea. Though a man may number the dust of the earth, yet thy seed shall not be numbered. Arise and walk through the land, and the length of it, and the breadth of it, and see all of it. For to thy seed will I give it. And Abram went to Hebron and dwelt there.
I'm just drawing people, it's not a pentagram I'm drawing, I'm just drawing a star because it's a reference we need to make, right? I just want to keep in mind. And then I want to draw here sand. We need to answer these questions later in Scripture. To answer who all the nations, tongues, and kingdoms are. Of the stars, as many as the stars, and even your offspring will be as many as the sand, as the sea. Those are the ones that the promise, those are in Revelation saying, and all the tongues, and all the nations gathered. Which ones? That's the reference for us to understand what Revelation is speaking of. Revelation is not a revelation on its own. It's a revelation based on all the prophecy being confirmed. People tend to forget that. Okay, but again, Abraham is given a covenant of promise. A covenant he will inherit a kingdom. And this kingdom is the land of Canaan. Now always keep in mind that that land was given to Shem from the beginning. But who stole it? Canaan. Hence he'll take that land of Canaan and give it to him. Because Canaan has got his own land, but Canaan has just taken the land, stolen Shem's inheritance. Part 1 or 2, can't remember. Okay, so
That's part 1.
We just read chapter 14, verse 7.
Chapter 14, verse 7 says, And he said unto him, I am Yahweh that brought thee out of Ur of Chaldees to give thee the land of the Canaanites to possess it forever. And I will be an Elohim unto thee and thy seed after thee.
Why was he called? By now you should be answering these things for yourselves, just like we answered Hebrews in the first one, right? Why was he called out of the land of Ur of the Chaldeans? Why did he live there? Canaan stole the inheritance of Shem. Hence, they have to live as strangers and as Gentiles amongst the other nations. And now he can come back. Why? Midst you are obedient, Abraham. Walk in my ways. Be you perfect. I'll give you this as inheritance. Abraham then commands that to his sons. I'll show you later on. Where did he get it from? Oh, from the book of Enoch. But I thought Enoch is not scripture. Okay. Now go to chapter 14, verse 11 through 18.
14, 11 through 18. Okay. It says, And he built there an altar and sacrificed all these, and poured their blood upon the altar, and divided them in the midst, and laid them over against each other. And the birds he divided not. And the birds came down upon the pieces, and Abram drove them away, and did not suffer the birds to touch them. And it came to pass, when the sun had set, that an ecstasy fell upon Abram, and lo, a horror of great darkness fell upon him. And it was said unto Abraham, Know for a surety that thy seed shall be a stranger in a land that is not theirs, and they shall bring them into bondage and afflict them 400 years. And the nation also to whom they will be in bondage will I judge, and after that they shall come forth from thence with much substance. And thou shalt go to thy fathers in peace, and be buried in a good old age. But in the 4th generation they shall return hither, for the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet full. And he awoke from his sleep, and arose, and the sun set. And there was a flame, and behold, a furnace was smoking, and a flame of fire passed between the pieces. And on that day Yahweh made a covenant with Abram, saying, To thy seed will I give this land, from the river of Egypt unto the great river, the river Euphrates, the Kenites and the Kezanites.
Does it say, to everyone on earth I will give this land, or to your seed? It says to his seed, right? What about the other? What about Ham, Cush, Mitzrayim, Put? What about them? What about the descendants of Japheth? Does it only choose Abraham? Of course it does. Was your God a liar? No. But note, something important happens. A covenant is locked, and he has to walk the flame has to go between these two animals for the covenant to be locked. And that covenant is based on the principles he learned, which he gave his sons. Do not marry the daughters of Canaan. The principles learned in all the books present with who? Moses and Shem, where Abraham went to go learn to be obedient to God. Because prior, Abraham was walking around thinking, well, where is this creator of this earth? I see the sun rise every morning. Maybe that is Yahweh. Let me start worshipping the sun. Yahweh says, no, that's not the sun. Come here. Let me teach you who I am. And the Creator reveals himself. He starts speaking this language, pure Hebrew again, the language of creation. Is spoken through Abraham again. And a covenant is locked on the principle of him being obedient to the Most High. But obedience requires these things written in the law, right? And then the flame goes between these two animals. It's a highly significant thing. We're going to go read about this in our book so you can see that these books are true. Because this is Jubilee. It's true. Same thing is written in Genesis. It's true. And then I want to show you the significance of this covenant. For his seed must do exactly the same thing as well. His offspring must also not go marry the daughters of Canaan, as he, Abraham, commanded them himself, as he told them, as I have received these books from who? Enoch. The seventh from Abram. Enoch was a righteous man, perfect in all his generations, and God took him. That Enoch. Those are the scrolls and the lively oracles given to him. Okay? So, let's quickly read. Let's go read it in the same thing we read now about these animals split in two and halves and the birds trying to eat it. Let's quickly go to Genesis 15. Let's read from verse 5 through 16.
Okay. And he brought him forth abroad and said, Look now towards the heaven, and tell the stars, if thou be able to be numbered. And he said unto him, So shall thy seed be. And he believed in Yahweh, and he counted it to him for righteousness. And he said unto him, I am Yahweh that brought thee out of Ur of the Chaldees to give thee this land to inherit. And he said, Yahweh your Elohim, whereby shall I know that I shall inherit it? And he said unto him, Take me an heifer of 3 years old, and a she-goat of 3 years old, and a ram of 3 years old, and a turtle dove, and a young pigeon. And he took unto him all of these, and divided them in the midst, and he laid each piece one against another, but the birds divided he not. And when the fowls came down upon the carcasses, Abram drove them away. And when the sun was going down, a deep sleep fell upon Abram, and lo, a horror, a great darkness fell upon him. And he said unto Abram, Know of a surety that thy seed shall be a stranger in a land that is not theirs, and shall serve them, and they shall afflict them for 400 years. And also a nation whom they shall serve will judge, and afterwards shall they come out with a great substance. And thou shalt go to be with thy fathers in peace, and thou shalt be buried in a good old age. But in the 4th generation they shall come hither again, for the iniquity of the Amorite is not yet full. And it came to pass that when the sun went down, and it was dark, behold, a smoking furnace and a burning lamp that passed between the two pieces.
Abraham, be good, be obedient, be perfect before me. Walk in my ways, and I'll give this land to you and your seed. And it will be a land, but now your generations will go dwell in a land that is not theirs. Where did they dwell? Mizraim, Egypt. In the land of Ham's descendants. In Egypt, where Joseph was. They dwelled there in the land of Goshen for many years. Went into slavery. But the key is in the 4th generation they will come down. Why? That's why I wrote it down. It's the key to understand the Egyptian that cannot enter the assembly. Even though he's your brother, don't despise him. He can't come into the assembly. We'll explain that later. This is what this whole teaching is actually about. But the background of it that we read again is, like we read in the Apocrypha, they had to walk through the two animals and the covenant is locked. Right? That evening. And then later on in that verse it says, in that day the covenant was locked with Abraham. I thought the day doesn't start there. Why in that day? Why when the sun was set did this happen? Because the day ended then. For those who did not know. Any case, so Here we see that happening. And we see this is locked on the basis of the commandments that Abraham gave his sons. Did he tell his sons not to go marry the children of Canaan? Oh, yes. And you'll see how the Apocrypha calls the children of Canaan all the sons of Ham. Why? Because they're all mixed. They're all of the same. Okay? But now I want to go show you something very interesting. So, if we then go to Deuteronomy chapter 11, verse 26 to 30, this is now what happens. Remember how we just read in the Apocrypha, the same thing in our book, how this covenant was locked with Abraham and had to go between the two animals for the covenant to be locked and sealed. And Abraham was told, even though your offspring will live as a stranger or a foreigner amongst a nation who is not theirs, in Egypt, Mizraim, in the fourth generation they will come out. Through the hand of Moses they come out, they go again, and they re-establish a covenant, but locked on a curse. Right? The law existed, it's only locked in a covenant. That's why the law came 400 years later. Abraham kept the law. The law that came 400 years later is, if you're not obedient to what I told Abraham, you're going to fall under a curse. To Abraham, this covenant is locked. Now the children of Israel come down. That generation dies off for 40 years for disobedience to God. Hebrews chapter 3 and chapter 4, which we'll get into. And then, before they go into this land, this kingdom promised to Abraham, something happens again that happened to Abraham, which is the same significant thing. And the reason I'm showing you, because it's based on the same things that Abraham commanded his children and their sons and their sons and their sons. Let's quickly go read about it. Go to Deuteronomy 11, verse 26 to 30.
Behold, I set before you this day a blessing and a curse. A blessing if you obey the commandments of Yahweh your Elohim, which I command this day. And a curse if you will not obey the commandments of Yahweh your Elohim, but turn out of the way which I command you this day, and go after other gods which you have not known. And it shall come to pass, when Yahweh thy Elohim hath brought thee into the land, whither thou goest to possess it, that thou should put a blessing upon the Mount Gerizim, and a curse upon the Mount Ebal. Are they not on the other side of Jordan by the way, where the sun goeth down, in the land of the Canaanites, which dwell in the campaign over against Gilgal, beside the plains of Moreh?
He puts the blessing on the curse on two mountains. And then what happens? Remember the two animals being split with Abraham, and it has to go through to lock the covenant? Here goes the blessing and the curse. And the children, when they enter this land that was promised to Abraham all those years ago, have to also walk through it. And when they walk through it, you know what happens? Either I look upon the blessing and remember, by this blessing and obedience, I can enter this kingdom. As a witness, that's my witness. Or I can look to the left and say, if I'm not obedient, I'm going to fall under the curse. This land is no longer mine. So that when they enter, after that generation died off, when they enter, they know the precept of this covenant. So that when you are disobedient and God takes you out of this kingdom, don't go and say, I did not know. No. You walk through those mountains, just like the covenant that was locked with Abraham. Now they go through those two mountains, one as a blessing and one as a curse, as a witness to them. And they have to go into that land that was promised, Canaan, to Abraham all those years ago, locking the covenant in exactly the way that happened with Abraham, meaning it's established on exactly the same law. It just has something added, a curse. If you do not obey these laws, you will fall under a curse. Therefore, choose life and obey the commandments. And one is put to the right and one is put to the left. And the children of Israel have to pass through that as a witness, saying, yes, just like our father Abraham commanded, we will do. That covenant is now locked on Mount Sinai. Question: did Abraham command his sons not to marry the children of Canaan? Oh, yes. So when they're walking through that mountain, do they know that? Oh, yes. Question: was the whole of Israel racist? No. Was the whole of Israel just being obedient to their Creator? Yes. Isn't that beautiful? But today's evil generation, the love of many have grown cold. Loving God is keeping His commandments. Today's generation says, no, you're a racist. No, Jason, not only are you a racist, the homophobes and lesbians and child molesters, they must also come and enter this covenant, defiling this holy covenant of the Most High. Evil, evil generation. Okay, that being shown, I just wanted to show you, because that was in reference to what we read in Jubilee. I just wanted to show you that it's not only written in Jubilee, it's also written in your 66 canon Bible, people. Don't be scared of it. If you do not understand it, it's because your knowledge is not increased. Okay, so I just also want to grab something to eat. So we've seen all the scriptures promised to Abraham, right? Did we read about those promises in the book of Jasher yet?
Yeah, I think we were checking them all off, weren't we?
Okay, so we got more than 3 witnesses at least, according to what I can remember.
Definitely.
Okay. Let me quickly go do this. Remember, while I'm opening this, what I gave you earlier is a history of Israel. Because people tend to get stuck in Egypt. Just like Israel of old wanted to turn back to the pots of Egypt, their minds are stuck there. You have to go before Egypt to realize what happened. The whole history. Why was Abram in the land of Ur of the Chaldeans? Why was he called out of there? We read there, okay, he was called out of Ur because he saw his father Terah making idols, and he destroyed these idols and told his father, you see these wooden stone? His father comes to Abram and says, Abram, surely you did this. You chopped all these idols of mine to pieces. And Abram said, no, can't be me. They had to do it. They are your gods, aren't they? And his father can't argue with it because he's worshipping them. So obviously they must be alive to his logic. And his father realizes, oh, shit, I can't say anything. And then his father goes and reports him to Nimrod. Because his father was one of the chief leaders in the kingdom of Nimrod. I don't know if a leader, one of the military guys. I don't know how to say it. But he
was second in command.
Yes. Commanders in that's the right word. Commanders in Babylon. And the report goes to Nimrod, right? And Nimrod says, okay, bring your sons. So Abraham and his brother go up. But his brother makes a decision in his mind. We read it in the previous teaching. And he says, well, if Nimrod gets the overhand of this, I'll follow Nimrod. But if Abraham gets the overhand, I'll follow Abraham. So he was hinged between 2 minds. Just like Elijah told us not to be. Do not be hinged between 2 minds. If Yahweh is your God, follow him. But if Baal and Asherah is your God, follow him. So his brother is hinged in these 2 minds. So what happens then is, Abraham is called up to the king of Babylon, to Nimrod. And Abraham and his brother is thrown into a furnace because his own father pimped him or told on him. And for 3 days, Abraham walks around in the fire. Nothing happens to him. His brother dies because he was hinged on 2 minds. And he's taken out of this fire. And by that, Terah is now converted, saying, surely you have the true God. These wooden idols of mine, this evil, I'm going to follow you, Abraham. Then Abraham is told to go down to the land of Canaan, which was prior given to Shem. He's lying, but Canaan stole it. And he says, look at this land, Abraham. Walk in my ways, and this will be your inheritance. Establishing the lot that was given to Shem from the beginning. That line, that promise, right? So Abraham then goes down to Canaan and he lives there. And there are many times when Abraham goes down and comes back up and goes down and comes back up, and even his descendants go down and come back up. Because it's not totally given to them until Mount Sinai, and they go through, and Joshua calls the children of this evil generation and says, right, remember this covenant that was given to Abraham before you cross this river to go into this land with these 2 mountains, the blessing and the curse. Before you even go through there, come, let your sons get circumcised. Because the generation died off in the wilderness for not keeping the Sabbath, the law, and the covenant that was given to Abraham. That's why they died off. So here comes this guy and he says, no, bring your sons under the age of 20. They are innocent. Let them circumcise. They can go there. Okay? A child is always seen as innocent under the age of 20. Okay, so now I want to... Sorry, my mind was now all over in that one. I just wanted to give a brief background. on that.
Yeah, there's a lot. I would recommend people go back and read that story with Abram and how he's brought before Nimrod and all of that. It's very important.
Okay, so I just want to go show you, because I'm focusing on Abram again, right? How Abram goes down and comes back up. And some of the scriptures we read, I just want to confirm it so people can see what happens, right? So quickly go to Genesis chapter 12, verse 1 and 2.
Okay. Genesis 12, 1 and 2. Now Yahweh had said unto Abram, Get thee out of thy country, and from thy kindred, and from thy father's house, unto a land that I will show thee, and I will make thee a great nation, and I will bless thee, and make thy name great, and thou shalt be a blessing.
Okay, so he's called out of that nation to go to the land that was promised by Lot to Shem, his descendants, right? So now just go to the book of Jasher. Just read chapter 12, verse 64 through 70.
64 through 70. Okay. All right. It says, And Abram said to his father, Doest thou not know that the king thinketh to slay me, and annihilate my name from the earth by the advice of his wicked counselors? Now whom hast here, and what hast thou in this land? Arise, let us go together to the land of Canaan, that we might be delivered from his hand. Let thou perish also through him in the latter days. Doest thou not know, or hast thou not heard that it is enough loved that Nimrod giveth thee all this honor, but it is only for his behalf that he has bestowed all this good upon thee? And if he do unto thee greater good than this, surely these are only vanities of the world, for wealth and riches cannot avail in the days of wrath and anger. Now therefore hearken to my voice, and let us arise and go to the land of Canaan, out of the reach of injury from Nimrod. And serve thou Yahweh, who created thee in the earth, and it will be well with thee. And cast away all of these vain things which thou pursuest. And Abraham ceased to speak, when Noah and his son Shem answered Terah, saying, True, it is the word which Abraham hath said unto thee. And Terah hearkened to the voice his son Abram, and Terah did all that Abram said, and for this was from Yahweh, that the king should not cause Abram's death.
So Abram then convinces his father Terah through the means of Noah and Shem, confirming, say, yes, what Abram says is true. Go down to that land. Why? That land was allotted to Shem. Remember part 1 or 2? I can't remember which part. We read about it. It was allotted to Shem. So he has to go down there. And it says, he tells Terah, walk in Yahweh's ways. Terah, my dad, honor your father. Dad, please, walk in Yahweh's ways. These idols of yours is nothing. You think that you are something in Nimrod's eyes, Canaan, in Nimrod's eyes. But you are nothing. It's for him. Come, let us go down, because Yahweh has given me a promise. Noah confirms it, and Shem confirms it, right? So now, that being said, let's quickly go to chapter 13. Just read verse 1 through 8.
Chapter 30, 1 through 8. And Jacob went forth continuing his road to Haran, and he came as far as Mount Moriah, and he tarried there all night near the city of Luz. And Yahweh appeared there unto Jacob on that night, and he said unto him, I am Yahweh, the Elohim of Abraham, and the Elohim of Isaac, thy father. And the land which thou liest I will give unto thee and thy seed after thee. And behold, I am with thee, and I will keep thee wherever thou goest. I will multiply thy seed as the stars of heaven, and I will cause all of thine enemies to fall before thee. And when they shall make war with thee, they shall not prevail over thee. And I will bring thee again to this land with joy, with children, and with great riches. And Jacob awoke from his sleep, and he rejoiced greatly at the vision which he had seen. And he called the name of the place Bethel. And Jacob rose up from the place, quiet and rejoiced. And he walked with his feet, and he felt light, and it felt light to him for joy. And he went from there to the land of the children of the east, and he returned to Haran, and he set there all of the shepherds as well. And he there found some men going forth from Haran to feed their flocks, and Jacob made inquiries of them And they said, where are from Haran? We cannot read. We are from Haran. And he said unto them, do you know Laban, the son of Nahor? And they said, we know him. And behold, his daughter Rachel is coming along to feed her father's flock. Whilst he was yet speaking with Rachel, the daughter of Laban, came to feed her father's sheep, for she was a shepherdess. And when Jacob saw Rachel, the daughter of Laban, his mother's brother, he ran and kissed her and lifted up his voice and wept.
So here they go down. Couple of things here. Those who know will know. I'm just writing references because these things need to be answered, right? Where did they come to Mount Moriah? Right? I don't know how to spell it. Mara or Moriah. We say Mara. Just read that first part again. Mount Moriah or Moriah. I don't know how you say it in English.
Then Jacob went forth, continuing his road to Haran, and he came as far as Mount Moriah.
Yes. We need to answer that to know where this land is. Right? That's the key. There's a name there. That same mountain that he had to offer his son on, just called Moriah in that town. Remember, Hebrew, they didn't speak Hebrew, he learns Hebrew, so the mountain is called Moriah, Sinai, all of these, depending on what Hebrew they are speaking. But in any case, this I'll show you way later, it's very interesting. And then he says, do you know Laban? And she says, yes.
Laban, yep.
Hugs her, his kindred. Hang on. Abram went from Ur of the Chaldeans, a far land. Remember how I drew it? Yeah, let me just draw it again. Just for example's sake. Okay? Let's say this is Africa. Abram came from Ur of the Chaldeans. It's actually up here, but I'm just drawing it in one continent so you can see. Let's say he came from here, for example, Abram. And he goes down, all the way down. And then he gets to where? Moriah, right? Let's say that's the equator. And then Terah starts settling here. It's called the land of Terah. And he asked him, do you know Laban? He says, yes, I know him. That's his kindred. Can you see where Abraham lived and where his kindred lived? Is far separated from each other. They didn't all live in one area. Right? Why? Japheth, Shem, and Ham. Right? Shem gets inheritance and his lot is given by land and it's taken by Canaan. Hence, all the Shemites, the Hebrews, those Shemites, had to live wherever they could find space. That's why Abraham lived there and some of them lived there. This is the reason, what I'm trying to show you, that their kindred didn't live all in one area. They were scattered all over. And Yahweh says, I will give you a kingdom. Why would Yahweh give them a kingdom promised to Abraham if he already gave a kingdom to Shem by Lot? Why? We read earlier, Canaan took that kingdom. Said, no, the kingdom of Shem is better than ours. We want Shem's, and Canaan goes and steals it. That's why that covenant is given to Abraham. I'll bring you back into the inheritance book, was why it was given by Lot, meaning Yahweh said, this is Shem's land. Can Yahweh's word return empty or void? No. He has to go and establish him in the land that he said by Lot is theirs. This is why it's given to Abraham. So everything we covered so far, and the other parts you might have thought, well, why are we reading this? It leads up to us understanding how they traveled. How when Abraham now goes down with Terah from Babel, let's say from Ur of the Chaldeans, which is actually not there, it's yeah, but in any case, he goes down and eventually he says, do you know who Laban is? Yes, I know Laban. And he hugs this woman. And he rejoices. That's his kindred. The descendants of Shem. See, they're all over. All over. The exact same thing happens with Israel. When they travel or scout the land, they find someone and say, this person here, she's of the Canaanites. But she was not a Canaanite woman. She just lived amongst them. But they are also the descendants of Shem. locked in a covenant by Abraham, because there's a descendant line going down. Meaning that they can also be called Israelites, as the scripture calls those before Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob Israelites, because it's the same line of Shem. The covenant of promise was given through that line. The same line of our Messiah. That's why you've got the genealogy in your scripture, to go and confirm what I've just told you. And this time, so far, if you watched part 1 and 2, and now this is part 3, there's no dispute about it. None whatsoever. Okay? So, that being said, just where did you read now, Adrian?
We were in Joshua chapter 30, 1 through 8, or 1 through 7. 30, 30.
Okay. Okay, I think that's enough. Okay, no. Let's quickly go to chapter 13.
Okay.
Read there 1 through 28. I know it's a lot, Adrian, but this is a history and a backdrop of what I've just shown them.
Okay. And Terah took his son Abram and his grandson Lot, the son of Haran, and Sarai his daughter-in-law, the wife of his son Abram, and the souls of his household, and went with them from Ur of Chaldee to the land of Canaan. And when they came as far as the land of Haran, they remained there, for it was exceedingly good land for pasture, and sufficient to the extent for those who accompanied them. And the people of the land of Haran saw that Abram was good and upright with Yahweh and men, and that Yahweh, his Elohim, was with him. And some of the people of the land of Haran came and joined Abram, and he taught them the instruction of Yahweh and his ways. And these men remained with Abram in his house, and they adhered to him. And Abram remained in these 3 years, and the expiration of these 3 years, Yahweh appeared to Abram and said to him, I am the Elohim who brought thee forth from Ur of the Chaldees and delivered thee from the hands of all of thine enemies. And now therefore, if thou wilt hearken to the voice and to keep my commandments and my statutes and my laws, then I will cause thine enemies to fall before thee, and I will multiply thy seed like the stars of heaven. And I will send my blessing upon all the works of thy hands, and thou shalt lack nothing. Arise now, take thy wife and all belonging to thee, and go to the land of Canaan and remain there. And I will be unto thee for an Elohim, and I will bless thee. And Abraham rose and took his wife and all belonging to him, and he went to the land of Canaan as Yahweh had told him. And Abram was 50 years old when he went from Haran. And Abram came to the land of Canaan and dwelt in the midst of the city, and he pitched his tent amongst the children of Canaan and the inhabitants of the land. And Yahweh appeared to Abram, and when he came into the land of Canaan, and said unto him, This is the land which I give thee and thy seed after thee forever. I will make thy seed as the stars of heaven, and I will give unto thy seed for an inheritance all the lands which thou seest. And Abram built an altar in the place where Yahweh had spoken to him, and Abram there called upon the name of Yahweh. And at that time, at the end of the 3 years of Abram's dwelling in the land of Canaan, in the year that Noah died, which was the 50th year of the life of Abram, and all the days of Noah lived were 950 years, and he died. And Abram dwelt in the land of Canaan, he, his wife, and all belonging to him, and all those that accompanied him, together with those that joined him from the people of the land. But Nahor, where was I? But Nahor, Abraham's brother, and Terah his father, and Lot the son of Haran, and all belonging to them dwelt in Haran. In the 5th year of Abram's dwelling in the land of Canaan, the people of Sodom and Gomorrah and all the cities of the plain revolted from the power of Chedorlaomer, the king of Elam. For all the kings of the cities of the plain had served Chedorlaomer for 12 years and given him a yearly tax. But in those days, in the 13th year, they rebelled against him. And in the 10th year of Abram's dwelling in the land of Canaan, there was a war between Nimrod, king of Shinar, and Chedorlaomer, king of Elam. And Nimrod came to fight with Chedorlaomer and to subdue him. For Chedorlaomer was at the time one of the princes of the hosts of Nimrod. And when all the people of the tower were dispersed, Those that remained were also scattered upon the face of the earth. Chedorlaomer went to the land of Elam and reigned over it and rebelled against his master. And in the days when Nimrod saw that the cities of the plain had rebelled, he came with pride and anger to war against Chedorlaomer, and Nimrod assembled all of his princes and subjects, about 700,000 men, and went against Chedorlaomer, and Chedorlaomer went to meet him with 5,000 men, and they prepared for battle in the valley of Babel, which is between Elam and Shinar. And all those kings fought there, and Nimrod and all of his people were smitten before the people of Chedorlaomer. And there fell from Nimrod's men about 600,000, and Mardon the king's son fell amongst them. And Nimrod fled and returned in shame and disgrace to his land, and he was under subjection of Chedorlaomer for a long time. And Chedorlaomer returned into his land and sent princes of his host to the kings that dwelled around him. And Arioch, king of Elazar, to the title king of Goyim, and made a covenant with them, and they were all obedient to his commands. And it was in the 15th year of Abram's dwelling in the land of Canaan, which is the 17th year of the life of Abram, 70th, sorry. And Yahweh appeared to Abram in that year and said unto him, I am Yahweh who brought thee out of Ur of the Chaldees to bring this land for an inheritance. Now therefore walk before me and be perfect and keep my commands. For to thee and all of thy seed will I give this land for an inheritance, from the river of Mitzrayim unto the great river Euphrates. And thou shalt come to thy fathers in peace in a good old age. And the fourth generation shall return here in this land and shall inherit it forever. And Abram built an altar and called upon the name of Yahweh who appeared to him. And he brought up sacrifices upon the altar of Yahweh. At that time Abram returned and went to Haran to see his father and his mother and his father's household. And Abram and his wife and all belonging to him returned to Haran. And Abram dwelt in Haran 5 years. And many of the people of Haran, about 72 men, followed Abram, and Abram taught them the instruction of Yahweh and his ways, and he taught them to know Yahweh. In those days Yahweh appeared to Abram in Haran, and he said to him, Behold, I spoke unto thee these 20 years back, saying, Go forth from thy land, from the birthplace, and from your father's house to the land which I have shown thee, and I will give it to thee and to thy children. For there, in that land, I will bless thee, and I will make thee a great nation, and make thy name great, and in thee all the families of the earth shall be blessed. Now therefore arise and go forth from this place, thou, thy wife, and all belonging to thee, also every one born in thy house, and all the souls that thou hast made in Haran, and bring them out with thee from here, and arise and return to the land of Canaan. And Abram arose and took his wife Sarai and all belonging to him that were born to him in the house, and the souls which he had made in Haran, and they came to go out of the land of Canaan. And Abram went and returned to the land of Canaan according to the word of Yahweh. And Lot the son of his brother Haran went with him, and Abram was 75 years old when he went forth from Haran to return to the land of Canaan. And he came to the land of Canaan according to the word of Yahweh to Abram, and he pitched his tent and dwelt in the plain of Mamre. And with him was Lot his brother's son, and all belonging to him. And Yahweh appeared again to Abram and said, To thy seed will I give this land. And he there built an altar to Yahweh who appeared to him, which still to this day is in the plains of Mamre.
Here we see, the reason I'm reading this, I'm trying to make you see. Abraham goes down to Canaan, right? Let me draw, because people are going to think, this is an accurate drawing and this is truth. I'm just drawing in general. Most of it is truth, but I need to add more detail for you to understand. So, what I'm trying to show you, people, is the history of Eber and Shem and them, right? Let's say this is the land that they are in. Abraham lives here in Ur of the Chaldeans. him and his father go down and they live in the land of Terah, right? And then Abram goes even further down and then he lives in the land of Canaan, or in English it's C, right? Not K. Canaan. Abram then goes back to the land of Terah and he lives there for 5 years. And he takes some of the people in that live with Terah and converts them to be obedient. Is Terah a different nation or his own kindred?
His own kindred.
His father's people. And then he takes them and he converts them and then he goes back again to Canaan. Every time that he lives at this tree called Marna, the plains of Marma, where he goes from, it's at the base of this mount, Moriah or Mara, right? That plain is where Abram is going to. But every time he leaves this place, he always leaves someone to look after that area, that household of his. There's always a remnant that stays behind. So that when he gets back, it's all in place, right? You can read about it in the scriptures. But what I'm trying to show you, there's a whole history of him going down, coming back up, and going down, and coming back up. And every time on the way, he meets certain people because Shem's descendants don't have land. It was stolen by Canaan. Hence, they are all over. Hence, the covenant, I will give you this land because it was promised by Lot to your forefathers. Okay? So I want you to see this traveling up and down. Because with this traveling up and down, this descendants of Shem starts living all over the place for a reason. Okay? So where did you read now, Adrian?
That was Joshua 13.
Okay, go to Joshua chapter 16. Just read verse 10 through 11. Oh, no, not Joshua. Sorry. Okay, read Joshua chapter 15, verse 1 to 3.
15, 1 through 3. And in that year there was a heavy famine throughout the land of Canaan, and the inhabitants of the land could not remain on account of the famine, for it was very grievous. And Abram and all belonging to him rose and went down to Egypt on account of the famine. And when they were at the brook of Mitzrayim, they remained there for some time to rest from the fatigue of the road. And Abram and Sarai were walking at the border of the brook of Mitzrayim, and Abram beheld his wife Sarai, that she was very beautiful.
Okay. So Abram came down from Ur. He went to the land of Terah, because that's where Terah settled after they came from Ur at Babylon. Terah settled at this place, his father. Then from Terah, he goes to Canaan. From Canaan, he goes back to Terah. From Terah, he goes back to Canaan. From Canaan, he's now going where?
Mitzrayim.
Back to Egypt. His travel is not one travel. Every single time on the road, he starts meeting these little spots. Shem's descendants. Every single time. If you do not know this history, you will not know who's the stranger is who dwells amongst you, who has to sojourn with Israel. Or is it Canaanites? Those who are not allowed to enter the assembly. Those Abram said, do not take them for your sons and your children. Okay? You were in, where were you now?
Joshua 15.
Okay, now go to just same chapter, just read verse 33 to 35.
It says, and Abram arose, and he and all belonging to him went away from Egypt, and Pharaoh ordered some of his men to accompany him, and all that went with him. And he returned to the land of Canaan, to the place where he had made the altar, where he had first pitched his tent. And Lot, the son of Haran, Abram's brother, had a heavy stock of cattle and flocks and herds and tents. And for Yahweh was bountiful to them for the account of Abram.
So now Abram goes from Egypt. Remember, they saw his wife and they said, this is a beautiful wife. And the angel came in to smite those who wanted to touch his wife. This is where Abram went to Egypt, right? This is a Pharaoh, a different one, not the one that you chose. So now he's there again. Now what happens? He goes back down again. Can you see how Abram traveled? That's why he was called a wanderer. Always traveling the whole world and teaching people in Yahweh's ways. Do you have that faith? Okay. But I'm trying to show you how this travel, how this map is, this history is so important. If you do not know this, in your mind you think, they live there and they live there and they take off their daughters. No. Some of Abram's descendants stay here in Egypt. They stay behind. He takes Lot and them down. Some of his descendants stay in the land of Terah. Some of them go down and live with him in Canaan. You ought to know this history. If you do not, you're going to lean on your own understanding and corrupt yourselves. These things, remember part 1, was written for our edification and our learning. It was written over time and handed to us. In the same way it was handed from Enoch to Methuselah, and from Methuselah to Noah, and from Noah to Shem, and from Shem to Abram. From Abram to Isaac, from Isaac to Jacob, and to Jacob his 12 sons. And from his 12 sons all the way up to the Messiah. Same law, same God, same rules, covenants. This should be so easy to understand. I understand getting these journeys is a big thing. It took me years to understand the journeys and map them out. That's why I'm writing down that we went to the plain of Mirma, which is at the plain of the Mount of Mara. It's very, very significant to understand these things because the scriptures speak about these names and we ought to know exactly where they are. Which, if you guys can remind me, because I'll probably wipe this out, I will show you after we are done and we go into the genealogies what the star means, what the sand means, what this Mara means. Everything in scripture with no opinions that are required. I don't care about your feelings and your opinions. I'll go show you exactly what it means because we have to search out the matter to see whether it's true. We have to be like the noble Bereans. And if these things were written for us and our edification over time, we ought to have known these things and the travelings of all that happened. How the lot was given to the 3 sons of Noah. How Canaan steals that lot. How Abram keeps the law. That's why it's accounted to him as faith. He kept the law. And how Abram commanded his sons to keep the law. And in that commandment, there's one specific, very dangerous one. Do not take the daughters of Canaan, which are called the sons of Ham. Okay, so I hope you're following so far. If you are not and you just joined this live, what I'm saying now probably makes no sense to you because there's a part 1 and a part 2. The history. I'm just giving you the history and the background. Where did you read last, Adrian?
We were Joshua 15.
Okay, so go to Jubilee. Just read verse 10 and 11.
Jubilee chapter
16, verse 10 and 11.
Okay, it says, and in this month Abram moved from Hebron and departed and dwelt between Kadesh and Shur in the mountains of Geir. And in the middle of the 5th month he moved from thence and dwelt in the well of the oath.
So, this is actually closer to Canaan, it's down here. But Abram moves from Hebron, which is situated in the Mount of Shir, which is the kingdom of Nimrod, Shir. And then he goes to the well of the oath, which is just below this place where he first came. Traveling once again, people. Up and down, up and down. Why? Why do you think that happens? Do you think if God promises a land of milk and honey to his people, that he promises without people scouting the land to see if it's good? What is he doing with Abram? Abram is a wanderer. Why do you think Abram is up and down and here and there and there? What's happening? Is this land good? He's scouting the land. What happens before Israel can enter this land? What do? They send out scouts, one of each tribe, and they go scout the land. What do you think Yahweh does to that generation that will be gathered back into this kingdom? This land overflows with milk and honey. This promised land that was given to Abram, Isaac, and Jacob. Do you think he's just going to bring the people and say, hey, go, go? Yahweh does not change. Go scout that land. See if it's good. Okay? So, Adrian, I just want to see something here and maybe we'll end it and start again. Where is this? Because I don't know. How long are we on now?
I'm not sure. I have no idea.
Okay. So that we've done that. Goes to okay. So we're done with that. I want to get into
I
something
saw
else.
two questions. Just so people understand, Jason was just talking about this. The sojourner are the people that are joining to Abram. They're not Canaanite. The sojourner are the people that are spread abroad. Just so everybody understands that, because this is a lot of the problem that we're having with people on TikTok. They don't understand this because they're not reading the context.
Yeah. These are these little dots I drew here. That start so like Abram goes to Terah and he gets souls. They sojourn with Abram back to Canaan. They are left there and then he moves up to Egypt. And then he comes back down to Canaan and then he goes to another land and he gets people there and then he goes back to the well of the oath. I'm trying to map out for you to show you that these people are not just taken from here and there. He's traveling all the land of Canaan, and all the land of Canaan, the descendants of Shem is living there because that is the land that was promised to them. Right? That is their promise and their covenant, but Canaan stole it. So they are all over. So when he goes and someone joins, and you think, they are Canaanite. No. God does not change. If he said, do not go and marry them, and they want to enter into the covenant and enter the assembly, do you think God now changes and say, okay, now you can do it? No, because of what Abram said. Abram got the law from Enoch, handed over, and he told his sons, please, my sons, do not go take the wives of the daughters of Canaan. Don't go into Ham's line. That is the covenant of promise, and he gives it to all his sons. Ishmael, all of them, which we'll go and cover, and I'll show you how Ishmael and them totally disregard that covenant. Esau totally disregards that covenant. That's why it's Abram, Isaac, Jacob. Jacob's 12 sons. Okay? They don't disregard it. They do not go and mix. Okay? So, by that being said, remember in the other part how we saw these wars and how Esau went to go gather these kingdoms to come and fight these children living in Egypt at the time in the land of Goshen. I don't know how you say it in English, but it's the land of
Goshen.
Goshen. So Esau goes and fights with them because when Esau, which is the same descendant, but when Esau, when the father dies, Abram buys a burial chamber, spelonk, I don't know what you call it, but place where you can be buried for him and his wife in the land of Canaan from a certain king and a kingdom. And these guys, remember in the other chapters we read in the other teachings, said, no, we don't want your money, Abram. You can take this thing. And Abram says, no, I will pay you for it. So that you don't one day boast and say, we gave this to Abram, because this was allotted to me by a promise of Yahweh, not by man. So Abram then buys those graves, right? And Abram dies, and they all get buried there, and then some of his descendants die, and they want to get buried there. And then along comes Esau, because Esau is now living in the kingdom of Shinar, because he's mixed into the Hittites, and he comes and he wants to prohibit his brothers to get into that, to use that spelonk,
Burial.
that burial chamber. And that
sepulcher.
They then get up and they defeat Esau. And then afterwards they are taken to captivity in Egypt. And that's why Esau then comes up to fight against those living in Goshen. He looks for a reason. He says, let's go and fight against Egypt. And the Israelites live in Egypt. His excuse is not Egypt alone. He wants actually to go revenge his brothers because his heart is turned to the gods and all of those things of the Canaanites now. And this is a war that happens. So I just want to give you a bit of an answer to that. Then we'll end the live and go see what Abram commanded his sons and their sons commanded their sons and see how that plays out. Okay? So, just about the grave. I just want to go show you about the grave in Jubilee chapter 19 verse 3 to 7 because I didn't think we covered that.
Okay. Jubilee 19, 3, 7. Okay. It says, and Abram went to mourn over her and to bury her. And we tried with him if his spirit were patient and he were not indignant of the words of his mouth. And he found patience in this and was not disturbed. For in patience of the Spirit he conversed with the children of Heth to the intent that they should give him a place which he should bury his dead. And Yahweh gave him grace before all who saw him, and he besought in gentleness the sons of Heth, and they gave him the land of a double cave or sepulchre over against Mamre, that is Hebron, for 400 pieces of silver. And they besought him, saying, we shall give it to thee for nothing. But he would not take it from their hands for nothing. For he gave them the price of the place for the full amount of the money. And he bowed down before them twice, and after this he buried his dead in a double cave. And all the days of the life of Sarah were 120 years. This is 2 jubilees and 4 weeks and 1 year. These are the days of the years of the life of Sarah, and this is the trial wherewith Abraham was tried and was found faithful and patient in the Spirit.
So the background of this is Abram goes up to offer his son Isaac. People do not know that it's an offer that was established by Satan. That's why it had to happen. Not that God wanted the offer. Satan made him convince his son to do that because of Ishmael. Ishmael gave him a challenge, and he said, if Yahweh requires, Isaac said, if Yahweh requires my life, I'll surely lay it down for nothing. Satan hears that, and he goes to Yahweh, and he says, listen, he said he'll give his life for you. I bet you he won't. And Yahweh says, go and test it if you want to. They are faithful. They keep my ways. Then they go up. The adversary Satan, who can even appear as an angel of light, goes, and he, on the way to the mountain, Mara, this mountain, Mara, where he needs to offer his son, a river appears, which was never there. Remember, Abraham knows the land. He went up and down all over this land. He knows it. And he walks and he says, but this river was never here. And he realizes it's the adversary. And he walks through and the river disappears. And he says, the adversary, Satan, is trying to con me. Then he goes up to the mountain. You know what the whole story with Isaac on the mountain. And Satan appears as an old man to his wife Sarah. And he says, listen, your Abraham has killed your son. He's offered him to Yahweh. And Sarah loved Isaac very much. And she was so grieved that she fell into a heartache and died because of that. And this is the gravesite that is now being born. This history, I assume you know, and I want to go read all of it because I'm more about establishing where Israel is and all of those things. So this is the whole context of this. This is the gravesite that Abraham bought, that Esau didn't want his brothers to bury their own kindred in. And Esau was also their kindred, saying no. And then they defeat Esau for that, and Esau wants revenge, and he goes up to Huason to fight against them. That whole context in part 2. Okay? So, what we'll do now, Adrian, I want to get into the commandments of Abraham, that he gave his sons and their sons and their sons just for now. Before we even carry on, I want to show people something. So what we'll do, we'll end this live, take a 5-minute break, come back and continue. Because we still, remember, I gave you history. Now we're coming back to Abraham, called out of Ur of the Chaldeans, how he traveled with his father, all of that. We'll recap in the fourth part that we're going to do.
Sounds good, brother. I just want to answer a few questions really quickly. Just everybody that I've been watching the comments. All of these videos will be posted on Jason's YouTube channel, which I know I've seen pinned a couple times. Also, Jason's going to send them to me, or I'll just copy and paste them and post them to my page. Either way, they'll be posted, but we're just trying to get the teachings done so that we can get them downloaded. And that downloading and uploading takes quite a bit of time. So just be patient. We'll get them up there as quickly as possible. And then I saw one more question. The sojourners and the strangers people, they're the same, as Jason said earlier, the same people. They're Hebrew people that are being collected by Abraham as he's going to and fro. So when you're reading this in the, like, say, the book of Genesis or wherever, the Gentile we'll get into later. We'll explain that later. But as far as what we're talking about right now with the sojourner or the stranger, these were people, like Jason said, that are living all over the continent of Africa. So as long as you have that understanding, just know they're not allowing Canaanites into their camp or their gates. That wasn't allowed.
This, everything Adrian said, we're still getting to. I'll go show you who the sojourner is and the Gentile and all of this. I'll go show you in Scripture. And let every man be a liar, but only Yah be true. You either go and believe it, that's going to be sort of part of the fourth part, but we'll get into it more as we end this life. So stick around, but note that if you do not have the background we've done up to now, you're not going to understand what we're going to do from here on. All that we've done, part 1, 2, and this part 3, is crucial. When I eventually get to the stars, as many as the stars in the sky, as the sand in the sea, the Mount Moriah or Mara, in the plains of Mirror, you'll not have a clue what it is, because it's where Abram traveled, where he offered his son, all of these things. And then I want to go and show you on a map where it is. I want to go draw for you where he walked, from here to there, from there, back, up. I want to go show you. So there's no doubt by the time we're done. But before we even get to this, hopefully people can remind me and screenshot this. So, because this is probably going to be wiped out, because it'll be right at the end. We're going to go a bit into genealogy, like we did with Abram, called out of Ur in part 1 or 2. Was he a Hittite and all of these things? No. The genealogy proved it. I want to do the same thing when we get to Esau, when we get to Isaac, when we get to Jacob. I want to go into this genealogy and draw for you lines and show you where the problem lies, where people get it totally wrong, because they are partial in God's law. They don't believe God when He says this can't happen. Okay, so for now, I'll end it here. It's okay, I'll end it here, and then we'll come back in 5 minutes and continue.